High-quality craftsmanship is standard operation at Electric Power Door and has been for over 70 years. Electric Power Door, located in Hibbing, Minnesota, has traditionally been a leader in manufacturing custom doors for industrial and commercial buildings. The company prides itself on excellence in manufacturing and customer service.
And now, Electric Power Door is pleased to offer this instructional video guide to complement our printed installation instructions for the hydraulically operated four-fold door. EPD has supplied the hydraulically operated four-fold door to hundreds of satisfied customers since 1982. These state-of-the-art doors have provided millions of worry-free cycles to their owners. The hydraulic four-fold door is renowned for its fast operation, reliability, and durability. The hydraulically operated four-fold door has been designed to make installation quick and easy when you carefully follow the key steps shown in this video and contained in our printed manual. Since all doors manufactured by EPD are custom-made for a particular opening and end purpose, it's not possible to show the exact installation method best suited for all projects. This video depicts the most common installation methods used to install hydraulically operated doors. Hydraulic four-fold doors can be designed for mounting on either the interior or the exterior side of the wall. The installation techniques shown are only to be used as a guide for installing an interior mounted door. The drawings and specifications for your project might also require alternate installation methods to be used. Make sure you follow the correct procedures for your particular project. All procedures required for the installation should be performed safely using proper rigging methods and equipment for lifting. All the methods used for installation must comply with all safety regulations for your particular job. All work should be in compliance with local codes and standards. Qualified, trained personnel must be used for the installation of this product. Qualified electricians should perform all electrical work. For reasons of safety, electrical power should be disconnected whenever the electrical system is being worked on. Electrical power should also be disconnected if the hydraulic system is disassembled. Additional safety precautions should be taken when working on the hydraulic system while it is pressurized. You should never check for leaks at components or hoses by holding your hand over the component when the system is pressurized. Make sure that the pressure is relieved in all hydraulic systems before opening any lines or fittings for maintenance or troubleshooting. To prevent contamination to the hydraulic system, be certain to keep the factory-installed plugs in the ports of the components during the installation. The plug should only be removed prior to the final connection of components. The EPD factory is always committed to providing additional advice and answering any questions concerning your particular installation project. EPD normally ships its four-fold doors on leased trucks with experienced drivers to make sure that the doors arrive at the job site on time and undamaged. The loads are normally tarped to keep the door panels and operating equipment clean and dry. When the truck arrives at your job site, position the load as close as possible to the opening to avoid unnecessary handling. When the load is untarped, you will notice that the door panels are all hinged at the factory and are banded together. All the small pieces of hardware are packed inside of a large palletized crate. The door components have been carefully packed and loaded at the factory. If any parts of the load are damaged, this should be noted immediately to the driver so that a proper claim can be made. It's very difficult to file a claim for damaged or missing parts after the truck has departed. Carefully unload the door panels and parts crate from the truck. The fold and jam mounted panels are marked with identifications that correspond to the part numbers shown on the project drawings. Plan the correct orientation of the door panels when they are offloaded so that the correct end of the door will be positioned for attachment of the lifting devices when the doors are lifted into position. The key to a good installation is making accurate measurements of the opening and then planning the installation accordingly. Width and height measurements should be taken at numerous locations around the opening to determine the uniformity of the opening. Some of these measurements can be made before the door is fabricated at EPD, so that the door can be custom manufactured to fit an existing opening. The jambs of the building should be checked for plumbness in the direction perpendicular to the opening and in the direction that includes the plane of the opening. The most important consideration in installing a four-fold door is to make sure that the door panels are perfectly plumb, no matter how untrue or unsquare the opening is. The mounting supports for the hinges, operator, and guide track assembly need to be located after the final analysis of the opening is made. Refer to the EPD drawing to determine the locations. The final size and strength of the mounting points needs to be resolved by a structural engineer who can coordinate the strength of the building's jambs and header with the requirements of the door. EPD is not responsible for determining the adequacy of the building and its supports to hold the door in the specified loading conditions. Temporary door stops and spacers should be installed around the building's jambs and headers to hold the door in position when the door panels are lifted in place. Refer to the drawings for the correct spacing of these temporary installation aids. The location of the spacers should take into account any irregularities that were identified when the door opening was measured. Begin preparing for the installation by placing one of the door panels close to the opening, correctly oriented, with the sill of the door closest to the opening, the standing hinges on the upper surface, and the folding hinges on the underside. Use wood cribbing or something similar to keep the door panels off the floor far enough so that bolts can be inserted from the underside to fasten the trolley brackets and other door components. The installation of the standing hinge bearings and support plates can be done much more easily while the door is on the ground. Most of the other door hardware and weather stripping can also be installed when the door is on the floor. Slide the pintle through the top hinge and then install the thrust bearing. Note that the outer shell only partially covers one surface of the bearing and fully covers the opposite surface. Make sure to install the bearing with the fully covered surface facing towards the top of the door. After the bearing is installed, slide the wall mounting plate onto the pintle. Refer to the drawings to determine how the flat flag portion of the hinge plate should be oriented. Normally, the flag extends towards the door for mounting onto steel jambs and away from the door when the door is mounted to concrete jambs. Continue installing the thrust bearings and the wall mounting plates under each hinge, working from the top towards the bottom. When all the components have been installed on the pintle, slide the pintle through the standing hinges so that the bottom edge of the pintle is about 6 inches above the lower edge of the door. This will reduce the chances of bending the pintle when the door panels are lifted. Starting at the top hinge, slide the wall mounting plate upward until the thrust bearing is firmly sandwiched between the wall plate and the standing hinge. Tighten the bolt on the top mounting plate to hold the assembly in position. Move to the next lower hinge and perform similar operations while additionally making sure to line up the flags on the mounting plates. Continue downward, but make sure to tighten one of the wall plates on the lower hinges against the upper side of the hinge, trapping the standing hinge between the wall plates. This will prevent the pintle from sliding downward when the door panels are lifted. The weather strip for the fold gap in the panels can be installed next. Center the strip over the gap between the panels with the pre-drilled holes facing towards the jamb panel. Slide the strip until it is flush with the bottom edge of the door, and then screw the strip in place using the self-drilling and threading screws provided. Some of the lower screws can be left out until the sill weather stripping is applied. The sill weather seal, or astragal, can be applied to the door at this point, or it can be installed after the door has been mounted to the jambs near the end of the installation if desired. If you decide to install the sill seal now, make sure that you take adequate precautions to protect the seal during the lifting and remainder of the installation procedures. The rubber seal is fastened to the lower edges of the panels with a pre-drilled aluminum retainer strip and self-drilling screws. Butt the aluminum strips against the fold seal that was previously applied and lap the fold seal over the rubber for a neat joint. The sensing edge, which acts as a center weather seal, can then be applied to the leading edge of the door. Position the seal against the sill seal and fasten the mounting bar to the inner surface of the door. The screws along the edge can either be installed now or after the door has been hung and the screw holes are more accessible. Locate the top guide trolley and fasten it to the upper corner of the fold panel using the 4 mounting bolts and hardware supplied. Leave the mounting bolts loose so that the trolley bracket can be positioned parallel to the edge of the door. The slots in the bracket should be centered on the bolt holes in the door before the bolts are tightened. Complete the sensing edge weathering by installing the short remaining portion of the aluminum retainer bar to the upper portion of the door, adjacent to the trolley assembly. Carefully route the polyethylene tubing from the upper edge of the sensing edge to the push-on pressure fitting located on the sensing edge switch box. The sensing edge can be tested and calibrated by removing the cover for the box and observing the movement of the flexible diaphragm and switching contacts located inside of the box. Each time the sensing edge is squeezed or depressed, the diaphragm inside the box should move and press the two electric contact points together. The sensitivity of the edge can be adjusted by changing the gap between the electrical contacts when there is no pressure on the edge. This gap should be adjusted to no closer than 1/16 of an inch to provide adequate sensitivity and to prevent false activation of the switch due to normal door operation along with the atmospheric pressure and temperature changes. This completes the suggested pre-assembly operations that can be performed before the door panels are lifted into position. If there is sufficient space, the same procedures can be performed on the remaining door panels. The panel assemblies can now be rigged for lifting operation. The method used to rig the door panels for lifting is dependent upon the available headroom and lifting equipment available. During the lifting process, it might be necessary to fold or rotate the door panels in order to install additional hardware and to correctly orient the door panels with the opening. Make sure to plan all phases of the lift prior to actually lifting the door. Safety should be of the utmost concern when lifting the panels into the opening. The EPD drawings provide an estimated weight of the panels that can be used to size the lifting equipment. The lift point on the panel should be chosen to assure that the panel assembly will balance around the lift point, so that the lifted load will be controllable and easily positioned against the previously installed stops and spacers. Use long lengths of temporary wood blocking to lay on the floor and extend through the opening to provide a resting point for the door panels as they are positioned into the opening. Once the panels are hanging vertically, align the pre-installed mounting plates on the hinges with the anchor plates installed along the wall jamb. Carefully walk the door panels into the opening, making sure to stay clear of the suspended panels as they approach the opening. Fine adjustments in positioning the panels can be accomplished by using pry bars and wedges to slide and lift the panel assembly. Once the panels are positioned, confirm the plumbness of the jamb panel. Shim plates can be installed between the wall mounting plates and the wall anchoring positions to compensate for any out-of-plumb conditions. Remember, the door panels must be perfectly plumb in order for the door assembly to function correctly. Use a clamp or similar tool to hold the top hinge mounting plate to the wall mount once the panels are wedged, secured, and plumb. Before proceeding, make sure to verify that the pintle was repositioned to the correct height above the floor and the lower wall plate and thrust bearing are in place. The bolt on the top hinge plate should be loosened so that the mounting plate can be slid upwards to press the thrust bearing against the topmost standing hinge. The hinge plate can be tack welded to the wall anchoring point to hold it in place while the other hinge mounting plates are positioned. Make sure that the grounding point for welding does not direct the welding current through the thrust bearings. Carefully tap the mounting plates into position, making sure that the plate is square with the pintle shaft and the thrust bearing being tightly squeezed. Tighten the hinge mounting plate into position. Continue aligning the mounting plates under the standing hinges, working your way upward. The hinge plates can be welded directly onto the wall anchors if the hinge plates do not require shimming. Use shims between the mounting plates and wall supports when necessary to correct for out-of-plumb jamb conditions. Mounting plates can now be welded to the wall support with the weld along the two horizontal edges and the single vertical edge of the hinge flag. Welding along the barrel portion of the mounting plate is not necessary. While leaving the panels connected to the lifting equipment, carefully remove the wedges from beneath the door. Watch for movements of the door and make sure that the hinges are carrying the weight of the door panels before detaching the lifting equipment. The door can be carefully swung open and closed to check for any binding or interferences. Secure the panels in an open position to make room in the opening for the installation of the opposing door panels. Similar procedures can be used for their installation. After all the panels have been installed, they should be closed and wedged in place. The end support for the top guide track should now be positioned at the top corner of the door opening, using the dimensions shown on the drawings. Clamp the bracket in place and fasten it to the pre-installed wall support. The center support for the guide track should be positioned at the center of the header. If a support plate to hold the center guide track hanger has not been previously installed, it can be installed now. Refer to the drawings for the correct location and mark its position on the center support. Fasten the track hanger to the support using the reference marks for guidance. The hanger bracket for the guide track can then be bolted onto the end support, and the end of the guide track can be slid through it far enough to allow the opposite end to be guided through the wheels of the trolley assembly. The anchor block on the top side of the beam can then be bolted to the center support bracket. Remove the wedges from the sill area of the door, making sure that winds or ventilation loads will not cause the door to move unexpectedly. Push the door open until the jamb panel has moved a total of 105 degrees. This is important to make sure that the panels are clear of the edges of the jambs when the doors are fully open. Hold the jamb panel in place and slide the guide track toward or away from the header until the trolley pushes the fold panel parallel to the jamb panel. Tighten the support bolt to hold the guide track in position. The guide track must be level to assure that the door panels will fold smoothly. Use a level to verify the position of the guide track before welding the track to the track hangers and support brackets. The guide trolley needs to be adjusted to make sure that the wheels and side guide rollers roll against the bottom flange of the guide track. The trolley alignment can be adjusted by loosening the mounting bolts and twisting the bracket. The adjustment for the pressure of the wheels against the flange is made by raising and lowering the mounting bracket and also adjusting the spring force using the shaft collar. Confirm the correct operation of the guide trolley by opening and closing the door and watching to make sure that the trolley wheels turn as the trolley travels the full length of the guide track. The temporary stops and shims used to hold the door in place can now be removed. Make sure to grind all the remaining exposed welds smooth in order to provide a flush surface for the installation of the weather seals. Refer to the drawings supplied with the door to determine the correct hydraulic operators to mount on each jamb. Note that the operators are manufactured differently for left-handed and right-handed mounting. The EPD logo and identification tag on each operator can be used to confirm the correct orientation for each operator, since it should be upright and read normally at both locations. Using a chalk mark on the back mounting plate for each operator and hinge will assist in locating the operator next to the hinge. Place a mark at the center line of each hydraulic operator base next to the attachment point of the hydraulic cylinder. Place a similar mark on the opposite side of the base to assist in leveling. Place a centerline mark on the back surface of the hinge that will receive the hydraulic operator using the grease zerk as a reference for the center. Using the hinge centerline reference, transfer the mark on the hinge to the jamb steel, and then, using a level, make a horizontal line across the jamb steel to locate the hydraulic operator. Locate the hydraulic operator using the horizontal line on the jamb and the line on the hydraulic operator base. Then, clamp the base into place. Once the operator base is leveled, slide the edge of the mounting support towards the thrust bearing on the hinge. There must be 1/16 inch clearance between the bearing and the operator. Recheck for levelness while maintaining the correct clearance. Weld the hydraulic operator into place and then connect it to the door panel using the pivot bolt supplied. Opening the bleeder valve on the hydraulic operator makes moving the operator arm easier so that the holes in the connecting arms align with the hole in the factory installed pivot block mounted to the hinge. Remove the pivot bolt from the hydraulic operator connecting arms and then reinstall it through the hole in the hinge pivot block. Make sure that the upper and lower thrust washers are installed and in place while positioning the arms over the block. Tighten the pivot bolt just enough to prevent binding and not affect its pivoting motion. Install the supplied cotter pin to prevent the pivot bolt from loosening during operation. Manually push the door panels open and close to verify the smoothness of operation. Make sure that nothing is binding in the operating system. Also check clearances to make sure the building is not obstructing the path of the door panels or the hydraulic operator. If there is an obstruction at the jamb, the hydraulic operator can be adjusted to limit the travel of the door by using the stop nuts supplied on the hydraulic operator. Turn the stop nuts, moving them towards the rod end of the cylinder to limit the opening travel. Make sure that both stop nuts on each cylinder are adjusted equally so they contact the stop plate at the same time to prevent bending the cylinder rod. Do not operate the door electrically unless the stop nuts have been properly adjusted, since the force generated by the hydraulic system can easily damage the rod seals and cylinder. While the door is opened, any remaining fasteners can be installed to complete the mounting of the sensing edges. Steel angles are attached to the door jambs and header to act as door stops. The weather seals provided with the door slide in place, using one leg of the angle to hold them in place. The seals can be quickly installed and adjusted using ordinary hand tools. Make sure the thin blade portion of the seal is angled towards the door. The electrical control panel and hydraulic pump unit can now be mounted. Unless the drawings show a specific location, try to mount them close to the door. Make sure the pump and control panel is not mounted in an area covered by the door panels when the door is opened. Field wiring must be done between the control panel and all the components using the most current electrical drawings. Make sure to use only the certified drawing contained in the control panel to make all wire interconnections. Do not use any other electrical drawings that may have been previously sent, since they may not represent the latest changes made at the factory. Connect wires between the junction box on the hydraulic pump unit and main control panel using the certified electrical drawings to locate the proper terminals to interconnect. Run wires from the appropriate terminals in each control box and connect each wire end to the same terminal number in each panel. Route electrical cable from the air switch box for the sensing edge across the door panels, leaving a large loop of cable at the fold. The loop should be large enough to prevent the electrical cord from stretching when the door is opening, but small enough to prevent the cord from being pinched between the panels when the door closes. Mount photo eyes and any additional electrical devices such as card readers, loop controllers, etc. as required for the project, and wire them to the control panel as noted on the certified electrical drawings. The exact length and the routing of the hoses that connect the hydraulic pump to the operators must be determined at the time of installation. Care should be taken to assure that the hose routing will be neat in appearance and not interfere with the operation of the door or other adjacent equipment. Hose connectors for the end of each hose have been supplied by EPD and can be field installed using common hand tools. Determine length of hose required and cut the hydraulic hose using a hacksaw. Trim the wires at the cut end using a hand grinder or wire cutter. It is very important to keep the cut end of the hose clean and make sure that nothing falls into the open end of the hose. Any loose particles can easily clog the valves and cause erratic operation of the doors and make troubleshooting very difficult. Using hydraulic oil or special lubricating fluid at the cut end of the hose will make assembling the fittings easy. Trying to assemble the fittings without lubrication can damage the fittings and cause them to break. Hold the hose in place by clamping it in a vise, taking care not to crush the hose. Install the outside portion of the hose fitting first. This piece has left-hand thread and screws itself over the outer covering of the hose. Keep turning the fitting until the inside of the fitting bottoms out on the end of the hose. Then turn the fitting backward to allow approximately 1/16 of an inch clearance between the hose end and the inside surface of the fitting. The inside hose fitting is installed next after removing the hose from the vise and clamping the outside hose fitting in the jaws of the vise. Adding lubrication to the inside fitting will again ease the installation process. Push the internal fitting into the hose as it is turned into the hose fitting until the thread's engaged. Then use a wrench to complete the assembly. Turn the internal fitting until it bottoms out with the top surface of the outer fitting. The hose assembly is now complete and can be installed onto the hydraulic pump. Make sure to keep the ends of the fittings clean until the hose is installed. The direction of the hose adapters located on the hydraulic pump can be easily changed to accommodate the direction of the incoming hoses of the door. If changes are necessary, loosen the nut at the base of the fitting. Rotate the fitting to the new direction and retighten the nut. Since there are O-rings at the base of the fitting, the nut only needs to be lightly tightened to prevent leakage. Once the fitting on the pump has been correctly oriented, connect the proper hydraulic hose to the appropriate port. The hose end fittings and the pump fittings are classified as SAE 37-degree flare-type fittings and can be tightened together without using any type of pipe dope or Teflon tape, since they seal using a wedging action. Make sure the contacting surfaces are clean and use a wrench to properly tighten them to 6 foot-pounds of torque. Do not over-tighten this type of connection, as it may leak or pull apart. Route the hydraulic hose between the door operator and the hydraulic pump unit. Use the hose clamps and screws supplied to secure the hydraulic hose to the header and jam or any other secure point. Determine the routing for the hose at the connection point to the hydraulic operator. The plugs in the T's can be removed from the T to accommodate hose connections at either the top or the bottom side of the T. Install the hose adapter fittings into the hydraulic operator where the plug has been removed. Note that the fitting has a pipe thread on one end and a beveled cone-shaped surface on the other end. Teflon sealing tape or sealing paste must be applied to the pipe thread end of the fitting. When using either the paste or the tape, make sure to keep the sealing material away from the end of the fitting. Excess sealing material can easily contaminate the hydraulic fluid and plug up valves if it is forced inside the pipe cavity when the fitting is tightened. When using tape, make sure to wrap the tape in a direction that will not cause it to unwind when the fitting is threaded into place. The pipe-threaded fittings must be firmly tightened to prevent leaking. After both adapter fittings have been installed, connect the proper hydraulic hose to the hydraulic operator, using the tags for proper orientation. Refer to the tags on the ports of the hydraulic pump and connect the blue tag ports on the pump to the blue tag ports on the hydraulic operator. In a similar fashion, connect the red tag ports together. Remember that the hose fittings do not require any type of additional sealing material and should only be tightened to 6 foot-pounds of torque. The installation of the hydraulic lines and electrical wiring to the sensing edges is now complete. Make sure that all lines are neatly run and fastened for a professional-looking installation. The door position limit switches now need to be wired to the control panel. Use the pre-numbered wires on each limit switch to assist in connecting additional wire to the same numbered terminals in the control box. The door position switches have been preset for normal operation at the factory. However, the closing activation point on the door position switches can be checked and set by manually opening both door panels so that there is approximately 1-inch clearance between the door panel sensing edges. The limit switches on both the left and right-hand operators need to be adjusted similarly. Loosen the top shaft collar on both hydraulic operators by easing off the long and short set screws and rotate the upper shaft collar in the direction that the door panels will be moving. Continue to rotate the collar in the closed direction until it contacts the position switch roller. Continue slowly rotating the collar until you hear the click when the limit switch is activated. Stop the rotation of the collar at this point and tighten both the long and short set screws. To adjust the open point on the position switches, open both door panels so that each jam panel is open approximately 90 degrees, or there is approximately 1 inch of stroke left on the hydraulic cylinder inside of each operator. At this point, adjust the lower shaft collar on both hydraulic operators and rotate them in the direction that the door panels will be moving as the door opens. Rotate the collar until it contacts the position switch and it closes its contacts. Tighten the set screws. The wiring and the activation points of the position switches can be verified by manually operating the position switch and watching the action of the 4 relays associated with the position switches inside the control panel. Each position switch is connected to 2 relays, one to activate when the closed position is sensed, and one activates at the open position. Manual activation of both the left-hand and right-hand position switches should cause activation of appropriate relays in the control panel. Since you will probably be standing on a ladder while you activate the limit switches, make sure to have someone available to immediately shut off the power in case the door unexpectedly starts to move. Each electrical control panel manufactured at EPD has been carefully designed and tested at the factory to make sure it will provide the unique operational sequence required for each door project. The components in the control panel work with the position switches, push-button stations, photo eyes, and other sensing components that are field installed. Some components in the control panel will require inspections and adjustments during the installation process in order to achieve proper operation of the door. Some of these items are: the settings on the open and close shutoff timers need to be adjusted during installation to make sure that the doors open and close completely. They are adjusted to minimize the running time of the hydraulic pump after the doors reach their limits of travel. The setting on the recycle time is used to adjust the time period between automatic cycling of the pump to repressurize the system. The repressurization is necessary to keep the doors closed against outside wind or ventilation pressure. The period between operations can be adjusted from once every minute to once in 100 minutes. Use longer time intervals for low wind conditions and shorter times for windy areas. The control transformer with fuse is used to reduce the operating voltage for the control wires to 115 volts. Adjustments on the transformer are performed at the EPD factory to compensate for the supply voltage specified for the door system. The fuse on the transformer may need to be checked if power is lost to the control wires. The motor starter is automatically controlled by the circuits to activate the pump motor whenever necessary. The motor can be manually started by pressing down on the square black button in the center of the contactor portion of the starter. The lower section of the motor starter, the overload relay, contains a resettable fuse to protect the motor from overheating. If an overload occurs, a red indicator will be visible in the small window next to the blue button. The overload fuse can be reset by pushing the blue button on the overload. The numbered dial indicator on the overload has been factory set to the full load amperage rating of the motor and should not be adjusted without consulting EPD. The overload relay can be tested by using a plastic pen or slender insulated probe to push on the small lever above the indicating window. The other relays and timer controls in the enclosure do not require any adjustments. The open and close relays are used to control the hydraulic valves. During the closing motion of the door, the sensing edge relay will be activated by the door-mounted sensing edges whenever an object is detected. The limit relays are activated by the left and right-hand multifunction door position switches, as previously noted. The run limit relays have been factory set to control the maximum amount of time the pump is allowed to run. Since hydraulic four-fold doors are high-usage doors, the electric counter in the control panel can be used to monitor door usage for maintenance. The counter will register up to 10 million cycles. The final step of installation is filling the hydraulic components with oil. The hydraulic pump is used to fill the system and bleed air from the components. Begin by filling the reservoir tank with the low-temperature hydraulic fluid supplied. Fill the reservoir tank until the oil level reaches the black line on the sight glass. Make sure to only fill the reservoir when the doors are in the fully closed position. Filling the reservoir to the top of the sight glass while the doors are open could cause the reservoir to rupture when the doors are closed. To check for correct rotation of the motor, watch the fan on the motor while pressing the open button. and then quickly pushing the stop button. Check the fan rotation in comparison with the directional arrow on the motor. Change wiring if necessary to provide correct rotation. The open-close hydraulic directional control valve is normally electrically operated by the solenoids on each end of the valve. When activated in the open direction, it directs the flow of oil to the base end of the cylinders to make the door open. When it is activated in the opposite direction, it causes the oil to be directed to the rod end of the cylinders to close the door. After the directional control valve directs the oil in the open or closed direction, the oil flows to the divider combiner valve that splits the volume of oil equally to the left and right-hand operators, causing them to operate at similar speeds. It can also be operated manually by pushing the small button located at each of the solenoids. EPD has obtained the directional control valve from various valve manufacturers to use in our power units. Power units manufactured before 1994 have valves that may look different from the valve mounted on our present hydraulic units. Even though the valves look different, they all function similarly when wired to the appropriate connection points. Depressing the plungers at each end of the valve can manually operate all of the valves. The solenoid activating cushioning valve is located on the back side of the manifold. The cushioning valve cannot be manually operated. When this valve is electrified by the multifunction position switch, it causes the door to slow down at the end of the opening and closing cycles. The final closing speed is adjusted by turning the F5 valve. The cushion for the opening direction is adjusted with the F6 valve. Begin removing air in the hydraulic system by opening the bleeding valve located on the hydraulic operators. Also, open the small shutoff valve located at the base of the pressure gauge, so the hydraulic oil pressure can be monitored on the gauge when the pump is operated. Verify that the 3 black manual operation knobs are fully closed. The hydraulic system can be semi-automatically bled even if the electrical wiring is incomplete, as long as there is electrical power to run the motor. This might be necessary if the door installer is not responsible for the electrical installation and hookup. Make sure to use the wedges to hold the door shut before proceeding with the bleeding operations, and make sure to keep the area around the doors clear of people and equipment, since the doors can move while the system is being bled. Sometimes the door might move in the open direction, even when the closed push buttons are pressed. So, be prepared and stay clear. If all the wiring has been completed, start the pump motor by pushing the close button on the push button station. If all the wiring has not been completed, start the motor manually and then push in the manual operation button for the close direction. This will push fluid through the system. Watch the fluid level sight glass to monitor the hydraulic fluid. Also, watch the oil pressure gauge, making sure to stop pumping if the pressure exceeds 1200 psi. Push the stop button or release the manual push button when the fluid level approaches the red line. Do not allow the fluid to drop below the red line in the sight glass. If the pump is run with the oil level below the red line, air might be pumped back into the circuit. Refill the reservoir as necessary. Continue operation in the closed position until the hydraulic fluid no longer drops. Run the hydraulic pump in the open direction using the electrical or manual open push buttons. The wedges holding the door closed can be left in place as long as the bleeder valves on the cylinders are fully open. Monitor hydraulic fluid so not to go below the red line on the sight glass. Refill the reservoir as necessary. Continue running the pump and operating the valve in the open direction until there is no drop in the hydraulic fluid. Close both bleeder valves approximately 1/3 and remove the wedges holding the door shut. Operate the hydraulic pump unit in both open and closed directions using either the push buttons or manually operating the solenoid valves. The door may start to move in one direction or the other when the bleeder valves are approximately 1/3 closed. After operating the door for a few cycles, move the bleeder valves to the 2/3 closed position and continue to operate the door in both open and closed directions. Make sure to monitor the hydraulic fluid so that it does not drop below the red line in the sight glass. The bleeder valves can be completely closed after cycling the door a few more times. At this point, almost all the air in the system has been removed. The maximum operating pressure should be checked and adjusted when the doors are fully closed. This can be accomplished by pressing the closed solenoid valve in and adjusting the number 1 valve on the manifold until 1000 psi is achieved. Exceeding the 1000 psi operating pressure will damage the system and overload the motor. Lock the number 1 adjusting valve in place with the jam nut after the pressure has been adjusted to 1000 psi. The doors can be manually operated by opening valves on the pump manifold. Turning the F1, F2, and F3 valves counterclockwise puts the door in the manual operating mode. The door can also be manually released by opening the bleeder valves on each operator. However, using the valves on the pump is more convenient since they are normally located at floor level. Closing all 3 valves will put the hydraulic unit back in automatic mode. It is usually a good idea to operate the door 2 or 3 cycles after closing the manual valves to make sure that all the air has been removed from the system. The other valves on the manifold are used to control the operating speeds of the door. Although all of the valves have been preset at the factory, it might be necessary to adjust some of the valves to achieve optimum operation of the door. The final closing and opening speeds of the door, or cushioning speeds, are controlled by the F5 and F6 valves. Adjustments to these valves are normally made to make the door come to a slow and controlled stop. It's important to remember that the cushioning adjustment in the closing direction must be made before the cushioning adjustment in the opening direction. The easiest way to adjust the closing cushion is to close the F5 valve completely by turning it fully clockwise. After completely closing the valve, the door will come to a complete stop as soon as the multi-position limit switch is activated in the close direction. The final closing speed of the door is then adjusted by slowly turning the F5 valve in the counterclockwise direction while watching the door. A very small change in the F5 valve position will allow the door to slowly finish the closing cycle. Once the F5 valve is set, the door should be reopened to verify the closing cushion adjustment. The door should close rapidly until the limit is triggered and slowly and smoothly close completely without slamming. If the pump shuts off before the doors reach their final close position, turn the adjustment knob clockwise, a small amount on the closed shutoff relay located in the electric control box. Adjustments of time on the shutoff relay should be made until the pump runs for approximately 4 seconds after the door has reached the fully closed position. If the pump runs more than 4 seconds after the door is closed, the time on the shutoff relay can be decreased by turning the knob counterclockwise. The opening cushion is adjusted with the F6 valve. It might be helpful to remove the oil filler cap to make it easier to access the valve. The F6 valve is fully closed when it is turned fully counterclockwise. Starting the adjustment with the valve fully closed will make it easy to set the desired opening cushion speed. After completely closing the valve, the door will come to a complete stop as soon as the multi-position limit switch is activated in the opening direction. The opening speed of the door is then adjusted by slowly turning the F6 valve in the clockwise direction while watching the door. A small rotation of the F6 valve will allow the door to slowly and smoothly complete the opening cycle. After the F6 valve is adjusted, the door should be reopened to verify the opening cushion adjustment. The door should open rapidly until the limit is triggered and then slowly and smoothly stop in the full open position without racking. In some installations, it might be necessary to also change the activation point of the multi-position switches to achieve the desired cushioning effect. If the pump shuts off before the doors reach the fully open position, turn the adjustment knob clockwise a small amount on the open shutoff relay. Adjust the time until the pump runs approximately 4 seconds after the door has reached the fully open position. If the pump runs more than 4 seconds after the door is fully open, the time on the open shutoff relay can be decreased by turning the knob counterclockwise. Recheck the operation of the doors in the closing direction to make sure that the closing cushion did not change after making the adjustments to the open cushion. The doors should close smoothly and fully with the pump continuing to run for approximately 4 seconds after the doors are fully closed. The direction of operation for the door can easily be controlled from the push button station. Pressing the close button will cause the doors to move in the closed direction, but they can be immediately stopped and reopened by pushing the stop button and then the open push button. The operation of the sensing edges can be verified by pressing on the sensing edge while the door is closing. The door should immediately stop its closing motion and return to the full open position. The photo sensing eyes on the door should also be checked to make sure they cause the closing motion of the door to stop. The door should immediately move in the open direction whenever the path of the photo beam is broken. The exterior photo eyes should perform the same function as the eyes mounted on the interior side of the opening. The overall speed of the door can be controlled with the F2 valve. This valve is normally set to the fully open position at the factory to make the doors operate at full speed. The valve can be easily adjusted in the field to slow down the overall operation of the doors. This is sometimes desirable for very large or wide openings. The easiest way to set a slower operating speed is to completely close the F2 valve by turning it fully clockwise. The speed of the door can then be gradually increased by slowly turning the valve in the counterclockwise direction while the pump is operating. Once the desired speed has been achieved, the valve should be locked in place. The closing speed of the door can be adjusted independently from the opening speed by turning the F7 valve clockwise. This allows the doors to open at high speed and close at a slower speed. The F7 valve is normally set to the full speed position at the factory, and it can be adjusted in the field to slow the closing speed of the door down, especially for increased safety. The final step in the installation process is to apply the finish paint. Make sure not to paint the weather seals or the polished portions of the rods on the hydraulic cylinders. Moving parts of the doors were not lubricated at the EPD factory, since the lubricant could cause problems with the applications of the finish paint. It is very important to lubricate the folding and standing hinges, the cylinder and operator pivots, and the trolley assemblies now, as noted in the operation and maintenance manual. The hydraulic four-fold door has been designed to require very little maintenance to keep it operating. Maintenance schedules should be developed to include the procedures noted in the O&M manual supplied with the door. Normal maintenance typically includes re-greasing the door parts previously mentioned. Maintenance checks should review the sensing edges for wear on a regular basis. In addition to checking the outer cover, the sensing edge needs to be checked for punctures in the air bladder and correct operation. The weather seal should be inspected for torn areas, with damaged sections replaced as necessary with new sections. All the fasteners should be checked for tightness and retightened if necessary. All the hydraulic connections and fittings should be checked for leaks. Tighten or replace any worn parts. The hydraulic hose needs to be checked for wear and abrasions. If necessary, reroute the hoses to eliminate the problems. The hydraulic filter should also be replaced following the recommendations listed in the owner's manual. Make sure to disconnect the power and relieve system pressure before removing the filter. Sometimes the F4 flow divider valve located on the pump manifold may require cleaning. The F4 valve splits the flow of hydraulic oil going into the left-hand and right-hand operators, making both sides of the door operate at similar speeds. It is normal for the speed of the left and right door panels to be slightly different, and their out-of-sync operation will not harm anything in the operating system. If the doors on the left-hand and right-hand jambs travel at significantly different speeds, there may be contaminants trapped inside the F4 valve and its cavity. Removing and cleaning the valve and its manifold cavity will usually correct the problem. Following the steps shown in this video and noted in the manuals will help assure that all the benefits designed into the four-fold door will be realized after the door is installed. The EPD factory and local sales representatives are always available to help with any of your questions regarding the installation or operation of our doors. Please feel free to call us toll-free at 1-800-346-5760 or fax us at 218-262-6478. Remember, our door systems are custom designed for your specific needs and can be modified if your needs change. Call us for assistance with any planned modifications like adding radio controls, security bolts, man doors, or enlarging the door size. Make sure to check out our new door developments on the internet by viewing our website at electricpowerdoor.com and email us at mail@electricpowerdoor.com. Thank you for choosing Electric Power Door.